Hi, I'm Neil Oseman and welcome to the Dark Side Guides. Here I'll be sharing some of the things I learnt during the wallet-crunching, heart-palpitating process of making my 35mm pilot for the Dark Side of the Earth. In this age of endless CGI, it may seem like miniatures no longer have a place in motion picture production. Yet there is a charm and a verisimilitude to real objects lit with real lights and shot with real cameras that not even the biggest budget CGI blockbuster can buy. Although your miniatures will likely be shot well into post-production and may only constitute a few shots, you need to plan for them carefully in pre-production to ensure that the live-action sets will cut seamlessly with the models. Get designs on paper as early as possible, so discussions can begin about how to realise the effects. In the case of the Dark Side of the Earth's pilot, I considered commissioning a full-size prop for the sealing mechanism, but ultimately rejected the idea due to safety concerns. Since I wanted a handcrafted look for the film, a miniature approach was naturally selected instead. Storyboards are essential for any effects scene. They will show all relevant crew how much of the object needs to be built and what actions are required of it, which in turn will enable you to budget and schedule for the miniatures. Even more useful is previs, which, however low-tech, is unbeatable for communicating what needs to be done. Cut! Once your live action has been shot and assembled, you should re-evaluate your miniature requirements, as what the edited scene requires may be different to what the script called for. Edit in your previs or storyboards to really get a sense of how the sequence will work. In the case of Darkside, we had originally intended to shoot low angles of the full-size wooden swordsman against a green screen, so that the sealing mechanism miniature could be composited behind him. Since we ran out of time to shoot these green screen elements during principal photography, I decided to make these low angles into full miniature shots, meaning that a miniature swordsman was now required to accompany the miniature sealing mechanism. Consider how your model will move. If it's a robot or creature of any kind, will you rod puppeteer it, cable control it, or animate it in stop motion? If a vehicle is involved, does it need to be motorized? Or, as with the train in my film Soul Searcher, can it be pulled along with a hidden cable? Wherever possible, try to conceal rods and cables rather than relying on digitally removing them, which on Darkside I discovered was a Herculean task, hugely extending my post-production schedule. The next decision to be made is scale. If fire or water feature in your miniature shots, a large scale is necessary, since you can't change the size of a water droplet or a flame. You may find there's a toy or collector's model you can buy to use in your scene, which will determine the scale for you. Remember that the camera is a fixed size, so if it has to get very close to or move through your model, the scale needs to be large enough to permit that. The overriding factor will probably be cost, so build your model as big as you can afford to. For the sealing mechanism, I decided what a workable size would be for the main gear, then worked backwards to determine a scale, which turned out to be 1/5. Next, you need to assemble your model making team. Making things in miniature is quite a specialised skill, so don't assume that a person used to building full-size props will necessarily make a good job of something tiny. If moving parts are involved, always have those made by someone with engineering experience, or chances are that the mechanism won't work or will break after a couple of takes. If a miniature version of an existing full-size object is being built, any model maker worth their salt will want to see the original, and ideally have it in front of them while they're working. Photographs just aren't the same. Therefore, when budgeting, factor in the cost of transporting these originals to the model maker. In all likelihood, your miniatures will be small enough that your model makers will be able to construct them at home, but if you have multiple people making different parts in different locations, do get them all together a couple of days before the shoot to make sure it all works as a whole. You don't need a real film studio to shoot your miniature in. You won't be recording sound, and unless you've picked a large scale, you won't need much space, so often a village hall or function room will suffice. Also consider shooting outside, particularly if you're using fire or water effects, or if you can use a genuine sky in the background. Although your crew should be small, make sure you have enough people to move all the working parts, plus model makers for last-minute tweaks and repairs. Even if your movie is digital, you'll probably need to shoot your miniature on film, because one of the things that can give your miniature away as a miniature is how it moves. Any little bumps and wobbles of your model and anything falling under gravity will look too fast. The solution is to shoot high speed, creating slow motion when the film is played back at normal speed. Video cameras can't shoot high speed. Some will manage 60 frames a second, but this may not be sufficient. To find the optimal speed, multiply the playback speed, usually 25 frames per second, by the square root of the miniature scale. So for our 1/5 scale swordsman, that came out at 56 frames per second. Lens selection is also important. Try to shoot the miniature with the shortest lens you have, as this will increase the perspective and thus the apparent size of the subject. Chances are that you will have at least one shot in your sequence which calls for miniatures to be composited with full-scale live action. Generally, the foreground element needs to be shot against blue or green screen, unless the shot is laid out in such a way that a simple split screen can be employed. In order to ensure that the miniature was filmed from the correct angle, the live action shot was fed into a second input of the on-set monitor. I then taped a sheet of acetate to the screen and traced over the live action before switching to the camera feed. We could then adjust the camera position to match the tracing. When a composite shot involves camera movement, things get a little more complicated. Unless you have the budget to hire a motion control camera, you'll have to think carefully about how the disparate elements will be made to move in sync. For this establishing shot, I chose to shoot the live action element as a lock-off. When it came to filming the miniature, the DOP performed a tilt down as we rolled. The VFX team were then able to track this tilt down and apply the same movement artificially to the live action element. They then extended the foreground walls to fill the height of the new moving shot. So, how much did all this cost? Here's how it stacked up on the dark side of the Earth. This is for 8 miniature shots filmed in one day on 35mm. Materials and consumables, £325. Venue hire, £45. Travel and van hire, £185. Catering, both for the shoot and for 2 days of final construction with everyone at my flat, £70. Postage, £25. We shot on stock left over from principal photography and borrowed equipment from a friend of the DOP, so those were free. We shot 400 feet, which cost £40 to process and telecine. That's a grand total of £690 plus VAT. So, the miniature effects were actually one of the cheapest elements of the Dark Side of the Earth's pilot, but they open out the sequence in a way which would have been impossible full size, and with a charm that CGI could never have achieved. So remember, when you're thinking big, think small. Good luck!